Hello, friends. Welcome to the show. It's a beautiful day today, isn't it? I'm your host, Zach McDaniel, and this is Screen Pass. So let's get started by talking about some of the biggest news in college football today. The Miami Arkansas State game has been canceled, even though the game is being played or was being played at Arkansas State due to Hurricane Irma. Um, the Miami players wanted to be with their families during that time. Uh, in other news, Jacob Eason, quarterback from Georgia, is out indefinitely with a knee or leg injury. Um, so he will not play at Notre Dame this weekend. Jake Fromm will be the starter for Georgia, true freshman. Next, quarterback DeAndre Francois out for the season with a patellar tendon injury. Um, so James Blackman, true freshman, will take his place against Louisiana Monroe this weekend. Let's move in to our top performers or performances of the week. So for this, I'm just going to have five uh, players who I think performed, uh, who played a very good football game this past weekend. So at number five, I have the reigning Heisman Trophy winner, Lamar Jackson. Uh, Louisville played Purdue this weekend. Lamar Jackson had 485 total yards of offense, 378 pass yards, and 107 rush yards. And it was Purdue, but it was still a very good performance by Lamar Jackson. Number four, Drew Lock, quarterback out of Missouri. Uh, Even though Missouri played Missouri State and allowed 40-something points to an FCS school, Drew Lock played a very good game. He had 521 yards and 7 touchdowns, which was a school record for touchdowns for Missouri. So very good performance by him. Next up, Taquan Marshall, quarterback from Georgia Tech. He had 369 total yards of offense, 249 rush yards, which is the most by a Georgia Tech quarterback since 1944. And he had 5 rushing touchdowns, which is the most by a single player in Georgia Tech history. Georgia Tech played Tennessee but lost that game. Marshall still had a pretty good performance. Next up, Deebo Samuel, wide receiver for South Carolina. He took the opening kickoff 97 yards against NC State. He had 5 receptions for 83 yards, 2 touchdowns, including a one-handed touchdown grab. So that was pretty spectacular. Number one, I bet you're all wondering who this is going to be. Rosen, the chosen one, Josh Rosen. UCLA was down against Texas A&M by 28 points to open the fourth quarter, and Josh Rosen just worked his magic. He had 290 plus yards in the fourth quarter, 491 overall, and 4 touchdowns to lead the Bruins to a comeback victory. So that was number one for the top performer for week one. Now let's move in to the not top performers or performances for week one. This could be a performer or a performance by a certain unit. So let's move into that. Number 5, the Florida Gators offense. They only had 192 yards and 3 lost fumbles. it was against a rebuilding Michigan team. They had a lot of freshmen playing on that team. Their offense just it looked worse than it did last year. Sorry, Florida fans, but uh, yeah, number 5 on my list. Number 4, Florida State's special teams. They had one blocked field goal, one blocked punt, a kickoff return fumble, and all of that led to Alabama scoring 14 points. And if they didn't, if these mistakes were not made by Florida State special teams, it would have been a much closer game than 24-7. So they're number 4 on my list. Next up, number 3, Baylor's defense. This was a major upset. Baylor allowed 585 yards to an FCS school, Liberty. So that's pretty bad. Number 2, Tennessee's rushing defense. They allowed 535 yards, rushing yards, to Georgia Tech, which was a school record for most rushing yards allowed. Number 1, Texas A&M's fourth quarter collapse. Kellen Mond was only 3 for 17, and he only had the Texas A&M's team only had 3 rushes in the fourth quarter. And I think a lot of fans are blaming that on Kevin Sumlin. Texas A&M was up by 28 points at the beginning of the quarter, and UCLA just came back and won 45-44. So that was a big collapse. Next up, top 3 biggest upsets that took place this weekend. We'll start at number 3. Maryland beating number 23 Texas. Coming into the season, everybody thought Texas was going to be the Big 12 team to beat. They were going to be a major contender in the playoffs under Tom Herman, but doesn't look like it to me anyways. They could come back, still win the Big 12. I don't really see it happening. But Maryland, on the other hand, might be a very good team this year. They did lose their quarterback for the year also. Moving on to number 2, Liberty beating Baylor. We talked about this, or I talked about it earlier. They're not going to be an FBS team for another 2 years. As I said, they allowed 585 yards. Baylor did. They allowed 585 yards to an FCS team. Yeah, pretty big upset. The biggest upset of week 1, here it is. Howard beating UNLV. This was the biggest Vegas point spread upset in the history of the sport. Howard had a 1.2% chance to beat UNLV. That's the biggest FPI upset in the last 10 years. Pretty incredible upset. All right, last segment of Screen Pass. Let's just talk about the upcoming games. I'm going to give you my winners of who I think is going to win these games. So at number 6, we have Louisville at North Carolina. I'm going to go with Louisville. North Carolina is just not going to be able to stop Lamar Jackson. North Carolina couldn't even really stop Cal's quarterback last week. Lamar Jackson will have a very good game against North Carolina. Number 5, TCU versus Arkansas. Um, I'm just TCU is really uh, they lost to Arkansas last year, so I think this year they're you know looking to not lose against Arkansas again 2 years in a row. Um, I'm picking TCU on that one. Horned Frogs. Number 4, Stanford at USC. Coming into the season, everybody thought Sam Darnold is the Heisman winner and everything. That's what I think. That I still think that, and he's going to prove it against Stanford, who has a very good defense. I'm going to go USC Trojans. USC will beat Stanford. Number 3. This is a very interesting matchup. Notre Dame went 4-8 last year. This year they're bringing in Brandon Wimbush. He had a pretty good game last week. We're going to get to see him play against a very good Georgia defense. The thing is, Georgia is also bringing in a new quarterback. This will be his first game that he is starting, Jake Fromm. But I got to go with Notre Dame on this one. It's at Notre Dame. It's going to be a very loud environment for Jake Fromm. I think Notre Dame gets it done at home. Number 2, Auburn at Clemson. Clemson is a team bringing in a new quarterback as well, Kelly Bryant. He had a pretty good game last week against Kent State. I'm going to give this one to Clemson. I think they're going to put up more points than Auburn, obviously, since I'm picking Clemson to win. So, yeah, Clemson will beat Auburn. Number 1, Oklahoma at Ohio State. I'm not going to tell you who I'm picking yet, but this game is going to come down to who's got the better defense, who can stop who. And I don't think Oklahoma has that. Ohio State has the better defense. Oklahoma has the better offense. Very good matchup here, but I am going with Ohio State Buckeyes. And that's basically wraps up this episode of Screen Pass. Follow Screen Pass on Twitter at @screen_pass. And that's it. I'm your host, Zach McDaniel, signing off. See you next week.